try to hamper coal mining in Australia. These people were outraged that this was going on. Here's the news. We're trying to slow down and limit and hamper coal mining every place on the planet because it's not compatible with the future of the planet. I think that this fight is entering its kind of hottest stage now around the globe. Certainly in the United States, closer to really engaging the fossil fuel industry in the fight than we've been before. And it's going to require remarkable solidarity around the world over the next few years. The one thing that worries me about this fight always is how little time we have. I have no doubt that given 50 or 100 years, we could win this fight. Since physics and chemistry aren't allowing us that much time, I don't know whether we can. But I do know, and here I will end so that we can have a few questions, I do know that all over the world, in every corner of the world, and including, and in some ways, especially in the developing world that's done nothing to cause this problem, there are loads of people, because I've been in all those countries, 1 minute, yep. There are loads of people who are ready to go to work on this fight. And it's always an honor to be in the rooms filled with those people. And it's a great honor to be in the room with you, only virtually, just to say, I don't know how it's all going to come out, but I will look forward to standing shoulder to shoulder with you as we go forward and find out whether or not we can win this most important battle in really the history of our civilization. So thank you all so much for all you've done and all you do, and I'll look forward to seeing you in person before long.
Some of this big audience here who would like to come and ask you a couple of questions.
Good.
We're just trialing this. Hi, Bill.
Hello there.
I'm Jane Lawton. I'm from a little local climate action group in Melbourne called Durban Climate Action Now, and also from a thing we've got here called the Climate Emergency Network. Now, we've got a lot of problems here in Australia with the fossil fuel industry, as you know, coal and gas. The other big problem we've got here is the Murdoch Empire. They own 70% of our newspapers, so you can imagine how hard it is to get our message out. In Melbourne, we're starting our Join the Dots day at one of the Murdoch Empire buildings. I'm just wondering if there's anything else you can do to help us with the Murdoch Empire, because I think that alongside the fossil fuel industry, they are our biggest problem.
Of course, we have to deal with the Murdoch Empire over here too. Unfortunately, you didn't manage to keep him at home there in Australia. He's spread out around the world. And Fox News here in this country has proved to be the most poisonous development in a very long time. That said, we've begun to sort of sense that in many ways we can now, not completely, but a little bit, work around the media too, the kind of established media, and get our message out ourselves, that social media, that the internet is kind of reaching a place where it's beginning to carry some real weight. So when we were doing this Keystone Pipeline thing, we couldn't get anybody to cover us. I mean, it wasn't that they were attacking us, they just weren't paying any attention because, we were scruffy protesters and they were on the payroll of the oil industry, more or less. And it didn't, in the end, prove decisive because we were able to generate a lot of notice on our own. I think things like this Climate Impacts Day, this Connect the Dots Day, will be really useful. And one of the things to do is provide them with pictures and images so irresistible that they have to do something with them. So I was today, for instance, as a kind of, we were doing one or two a week in advance to kind of give people an idea what to do. So I spent the morning here in my home state of Vermont we had the worst flooding and rains that we've ever had last August, and many of our bridges and things washed away. It was a kind of Queensland scale event, you know, in terms of flooding. And so we today went down and made a kind of human bridge across one of these rivers where the bridge had washed away. And the images are beautiful, and they're already out, you know, in the media and things, just because they're it's sort of inescapable. You can't not kind of want to look at them. And we will try to provide lots of images like that. It's very hard to overcome the Murdochs of the world because they've got the money. We have to figure out a little bit how to kind of work around them too. And if we make enough stink, eventually they'll have no choice but to deal with us. And that's the best I got. So.
That's great.
Thanks so much.
G'day there, Bill. My name's Sean Murray from Friends of the Earth in Melbourne and a group called Quick Hole. You spoke about the XL pipeline struggle before, and I was just wondering if you could comment on how important you think the role of civil disobedience will be in directly confronting the power of the fossil fuel industries generally.
It's a very good question. I think that civil disobedience is one tool in the toolkit, okay? I think it's a mistake to make it the only tool or the first thing you reach for. It can easily backfire. It can seem extreme to people and turn them off unless you do it carefully and well. But I also think that there are moments, I think the real virtue of it, we're not going to stop the fossil fuel industry with our bodies, right? It's too big to really do that. If we stop it for a day, it's just there the next day and whatever. So the real value of civil disobedience is always symbolic. It's to demonstrate the moral urgency of the situation that we're in. And therefore, used carefully, it has enormous power. But carefully is the kind of watchword. Don't use it all the time because its power will go away used like that. Save it for moments when you can use it as beautifully and powerfully as you can. And I really do think one of the secrets is what I was saying before. Don't make it the sort of usual suspects, you know. Don't make it look the way that the other side thinks it's going to look. Make it more difficult and more challenging for them. By having, always trying to be the normal people, the ones who are represent the real world, and keep trying to marginalize them as the extremists and the crazies.
Hi Bill, Jonathan Doig. We met last time I was in Sydney. I did the tall ship in Sydney Harbour. Firstly, a quick comment, just a minor thing, but a thing about language. I am a radical, and I'm proud to be. I'm like a radish. A radish is a root vegetable, and I go to the root of things and think about them. And so do you, obviously. I'm not an extremist, so I'd sort of differentiate between those terms.
That's fair enough.
But that's a great point, that they are the extremists. The question, or comment and questions, you communicate, and like Navarre's too, you communicate extremely well with individuals. On this, I'm part of a group, and is that something you've thought about, approaching groups? See, to be frank, my thoughts about the climate docs thing is, oh shit, I still haven't fucking sent anything out to my group about that. We planned it, we did it in the meeting, we didn't do any minutes, it's a week away. And it's kind of mixed with a bit of resentment, unfair, blame someone else, because it's sent to me, and why do I have to pass it on? So, working with groups effectively over the internet, Facebook, I don't know how.
Well, we work all over the world with groups of all kinds, and that's sort of been the strength of the way we tried to set up 350.org was so that it wasn't an organization, because frankly, we almost have enough environmental organizations, or so it seems. What we wanted to do was have a sort of ongoing campaign in which groups and individuals could easily join and kind of play together. And that sort of, underlaid all our work. When we did this tar sand stuff, we set up a new website, Tar Sands Action, and got everybody involved so that nobody felt like they were getting left out or someone else would get the credit or whatever else it was. And I think that kind of campaign model for how to do things is the right way. As to the fact that May 5th is only a week away, don't worry about it. You don't need an endless number of people there to do something. We need some beautiful images that help do the work of, I mean, there's at least two sides to this fight. We do need sort of head-on, straight-on political battling, you know, and more of it all the time. But we also need to keep educating the world about why it is we're so upset and what the battling is about. And this is a very good way to do that because people connect easily to stories of human beings absorb the world through story as much as anything else. And the stories that we have to share about the trouble we've already seen are really important. We're not going to be anybody asking for pity or anything next week. It's going to be people saying, understand that we're part of a pattern. In some of those places, people are going to be a little angrier than other places. You know, Pakistan, last 2 years in a row, everyone, you know, millions of people have had to leave their homes because of flooding. Really, they're fed up. And people other places are fed up, and that's okay. Some of it's also going to be very good-natured. I was just in San Francisco where we were working on a 100,000 square foot banner. I can't do metric, but that's a very big banner, to put on the side of our melting glaciers in California. And the question was, what should we put on the banner? You know, some earnest slogan about global warming or something? And I said, no, we've got to just quote from that great hero of Western literature, the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz. And so the banner is just going to say in huge 50-foot letters, it's just going to say, I'm melting. You know, they're on the glacier.
Just quickly, in our local area, I can't think of, you know, a vivid climate impact. So what we're going to do, which others may want to use too, is... For some reason I'm having trouble hearing you. Say, back up and start again. I can't, this garbling a little bit. Maybe I'm too close to the mic. Closer to there? In our area, I don't know of vivid climate impact images that are already happening. So what we're doing is each of us are bringing a photo that's close to our heart of impacts around the world and joining the dots and bringing those dots through to the door of our local MP.
Perfect. That's a very great, that's a really good idea. Thank you for that very much.
Bill, we're and then we're through. I have three people who would like to put a question. What they're going to do is put the question and then give you a chance to respond.
Fair enough.
She's not very
fair enough.
She confuses me.
Good evening, Bill. Patrick here from the Plain Greens in Western Sydney. Quick question for you. Given the world has for some time been looking to leadership in the US in climate change, given that people seem to be becoming suspicious of the constant Republican denialism that's been taking place, do you think perhaps President Obama finally put climate change in his campaign this time around and actually do something in his second term? Thank you for the question.
Next one.
G'day Bill, Robert Yakapeta here from ARD, the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change. And a bit related to that question actually, I was going to ask about how courageous Obama might be this year, given the election year, what he can and perhaps will do. And related to that, what's happening with the religious conservatives in the USA? And I know a group's doing wonderful work there, but I'm wondering what sort of progress momentum they have, because if there could be a major change that would radically undercut the momentum in the Republicans against this whole issue.
Yeah.
True.
Hi Bill, I'm Lorraine Bauer and I'm from the Australian Forests and Climate Alliance. I'm not sure if you can keep these three questions in your mind, but I'm just wondering, we're doing a fantastic job of cutting down all our native forests and selling them off for wood chips. And as you know, deforestation and forest degradation contributes to about 80% of the world's emissions. We hear a lot about helping underdeveloped countries, and I'm just wondering whether you do anything about trying to stop forest degradation in developed countries like ours, and how we can, at a global level, perhaps have a stronger voice in that matter. Thanks.
Very, very good questions. Let me take them in reverse and see if I can remember the whole business. Forests are clearly of absolute importance, and it would help everybody immensely if we stopped cutting down especially big, old trees. And there are efforts around the world, as you know, to do that, and they're always under pressure. Right at the moment, we're fighting, for instance, to try and keep the Brazilian deforestation law from being weakened. But you're right, all this stuff goes on in the developed world too, and there's a real danger that we'll sort of seize on biomass and wood burning as a way out of our fossil fuel addiction, because the numbers really don't work very well. You send a big pulse of carbon into the atmosphere very quickly when you do that, and even if the tree grows 50 years from now, and soaks up some of that carbon, the damage done in the meantime. So it's a very important thing to keep an eye on. As to religious conservatives, the good news, I guess, is that I think we're making some real progress there. We're making progress with faith communities of all kinds around the world. That's been one of the big helps for 350.org. But in the US, fundamentalist conservatives have been a trouble. Younger evangelicals are very much more interested in this issue than their elders, and very much more likely to take it on. And I was very heartened last week on Sunday. I was at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., and we had a big, wonderful church service. One of the best parts of it was honoring probably our greatest living writer and environmental thinker, Wendell Berry, the Kentucky farmer and essayist whose work, if you don't know it, I highly recommend to you. And the other half of the service was the leaders of many of the evangelical seminaries in this country coming forward to sign a pledge, a compact, to promise to work hard in their seminaries on education around climate change. Now, it won't be as, fierce as we want it to be, at least for a while, but it's a strong start, and that's important. And it does lead into this original question about American politics and Barack Obama. Last week, two things happened that were important. One was a poll came out showing the percentage of Americans who are worried about global warming has gone up fairly sharply last 2 years. The reason is because they're making a connection between climate change and our strange weather. And it makes this connectedness all the more important because we can really emphasize that. The other thing that would happen, and it was related, was that President Obama gave an interview in which he said, I think climate change will be an important part of this year's election campaign. And he talked in particular about this Keystone protest as an example of the frustration that people have with slow progress. Now, this doesn't mean that Barack Obama is going to do anything incredibly dramatic anytime soon. He won't, and he doesn't have the room in Congress to, even if he wanted to, okay? But it does mean, and the good news is, that those very political people in the White House in his election campaign have perceived that there is advantage to be talking about climate change. And that's the best sign we have that public sentiment is moving in that way. Because, at least in this country, political leaders follow public sentiment more than they lead it. And so I think that that's a good sign. Don't hold your breath for the United States to be the great leader for the deepest addict to fossil fuel in the world. And it's the place in certain ways for the battle hardest. But there's at least some ice beginning to break, as it were. That may not be the best metaphor, actually, in this fight over here, and also in many of the other places around the world where we work. And I think the good work that you're doing there down under has played a role in all of that happening too. And I just thank you so much for it and look forward to working together. Thank you all.